So before I jump into today's video, for those of you who are only familiar with my channel through my Jack and Lily videos, that snoring in the background is my chihuahua. So let's get on with this. Seems that Daniel just cannot get enough time in front of the camera, and who's done more interviews. I've already done one review, I think it was last week, of more interviews from him, and yet we've had the Vigil, which he attended and he did an interview from, which may be out and about already, but I hadn't spotted it. And then another interview that was done just a few days ago. He covers a few different topics, including custody of his children, Polygraph, Vigil, and Malaya's mental health. So I wanted to play through these and share what I see, share what I think, based on his language and based on his body language. Now, I'm not going to faff around too much with a long introduction, but just a quick recap for anyone who may not be familiar with the Jack and Lily case. These two beautiful children, Lily, who is 6, Jack, who is 4, went missing on the 2nd of May. There has been no sign of them since. There has been extensive searches done around their home and a lot of investigative work done in the background by the Mounties. So we are well over a month past them going missing, and the Mounties, in a recent press release, have assured us that they are still working hard on this case. Meanwhile, the gift that keeps giving, their mother's former boyfriend, has done more interviews. I'm going to refer to him as former boyfriend. He's not a stepfather. They were not married. And basically they were boyfriend and girlfriend. They are not together anymore, which makes him pretty much a person who was in their lives, but family-wise, that's about as far as it goes. I know some people get annoyed with me for saying that, but I think it is important to keep this in mind. It is important to remember that he's only had a small role in the upbringing of these children. He's only been in their lives for 2 or 3 years. They're not his children. And yet, you'd think so, based on what we see in the media. So, with that said, let's jump in and have a look at this first interview.
Lily and Jack Sullivan, still missing?
Reading the words from a page he was handed at a vigil for his missing stepchildren, 6-year-old Lily and 4-year-old Jack Sullivan, Daniel Martell says it brought out a lot of emotions.
Okay, so straight off the bat, he's reading a flyer from the Vigil for Jack and Lily. I would expect to see on his face some sign of distress, sadness, anxiety, but instead, what I'm seeing here is the corners of his mouth are slightly lifted, the cheeks are slightly puffed out. This is Duper's delight. This guy's actually smiling over this flyer. He's definitely not distressed. To me, that is definitely a sign of someone who is not grieving over these children having been gone for a month and the realisation that they're probably not coming back. Now this of course is simply my opinion based on what I'm seeing. I'm not saying this is factual. I'm not saying 100% that he is involved. But to me, he has the appearance of someone who is feeling quite smug and feels that they have got one over authorities.
They had some RCMP speakers and people from the community, and there was even one guy who drove all the way from Sheet Harbour to come up and show his respect, so I appreciate that.
So this is a particularly interesting choice of words from Daniel. He talks about a man driving up all the way from Sheet Harbour to come up and show his respect. Now, had they found these children and they found them deceased, then perhaps I would expect to hear pay his respects. However, show his respect is really not that far off. And to me it does sound like a variation of paying your respects to someone, which is of course what you do when someone is deceased. Now, later in this clip, the interviewer mentions that Daniel still has hopes. Well, his language here tells me that he is certain these children are deceased, and that this whole thing with the vigil was for deceased children. It wasn't a vigil in his mind to hope that the children would be brought home. In his mind, it was a vigil because the children are deceased. He also tacks on the end of it, I appreciate that. And I guess you could say people are like, well, I appreciate these people came out to show their support. I appreciate that they've come to show that they care. So maybe it's nothing. But to me, it sounds like, again, this internalisation, and that it's more to do with him than to do with the children. I could be wrong on this one. I could be wrong on all of them, but I could be wrong on this one. Note though that he doesn't say we appreciate that. It's I appreciate that. So he's not talking on behalf of the family. He's talking on behalf of himself. And like I said, that this one's open to interpretation. But to me, it seems that here he's drawing the focus from the children back to himself. To him, this is about the guy that turned up from Sheet Harbour, wherever that is. This is about him doing it out of respect for Daniel, not out of respect for the children. Possibly misinterpretation. Let me know your thoughts.
The children are believed to have wandered away from their home on May 2nd. It's been weeks and not much has turned up since. But Martell is still holding on to hope the children will be found safe.
It doesn't get any easier. I mean, 1 month has passed.
So he's saying here it doesn't get any easier. And he qualifies that by saying, 1 month has passed. Okay, yeah, I'll pay that. 1 month has passed. But really, that's the first thing that comes to mind when you say it doesn't get any easier. Because I would expect things to hear like, it's so quiet here. I miss them. Have we ever heard that? Or it feels like they've been gone for an eternity. Any of these things that would suggest an emotional connection, it doesn't get any easier. These are the reasons why. 1 month passing is more of a secondary statement. It doesn't get any easier because I really miss them. It's been a month since I saw them, you know, or because they've looked everywhere and they haven't found them and it's been a month. But to make that just the primary statement with nothing else connected to it, it doesn't get any easier. I mean, 1 month has passed. It's not showing any emotional connection to the fact that these children are missing whatsoever. It's just a statement of fact, pretty much. And again, after he says, I mean, you see the corners of the mouth lift before he says 1 month has passed. He's also shaking his head as he says, it doesn't get any easier. Which is one of the very few tells we see from him, because you can see that he is trying very hard to control any sort of facial expressions, any body movements. He is not moving enough for someone who is expressing somewhat emotive things. So him shaking his head while he's saying it doesn't get any easier, and then you see the lifted mouth after I mean, before he says 1 month has passed. Again, that looks to me like a sign of deception. I think for him, he feels that it is getting easier because a month has passed, and maybe he feels that the pressure's off and that if they haven't found them now, they're not going to find them. Because I have no doubt whatsoever in my mind that him and Malaya both know what happened to those children. Now, because that clip is kind of short, I am going to play it again for you, slowed down, so you can see the things that I'm talking about here.
It doesn't get any easier. I mean, 1 month has passed.
It's a little bit frustrating that they cut the screen off at the end of that, because I would be willing to bet that after he said past, that you probably saw the lips, the corners of the lips, tilt upwards again.
Children's mother didn't attend the vigil. Martell says the grief has been overwhelming and online speculation hasn't helped, especially for their daughter that still lives with her.
Put your focus outward around Malaya and toward the kids. Don't attack Malaya, because her mental health is, it's going to be reflected on her daughter, so I don't want anyone attacking Malaya anymore.
There's a lot to unpack here. First of all, I don't know if it's relevant, but him saying, we are focused outward around Malaya. It's just an odd way of wording it. It's not something that I would say, but I don't think that means anything. I think it's just an odd way of saying it. We are focused outward around Malaya and towards the kids. We're not looking at Malaya anymore. We're focusing on the kids, which should have been the situation from the beginning. Now, this is where you see a change in the cadence of his speech. It's no longer fluent. So we get don't and a big sigh. Don't attack Malaya. So he couldn't even get that out in one sentence, telling people not to attack Malaya. And then he says, because her mental health is, and he doesn't finish that sentence either. It's going to be reflected on our daughter. So I don't want anyone attacking Malaya anymore. So first of all, the don't attack Malaya. The fact that he falters on that says to me that actually he would still prefer if the focus were on Malaya, because what we have seen online is this whole push for people of, well, he's the one that stayed there, she's the one that took off. This makes him the hero in the situation. And come on, he likes that. He likes the fact that people are saying he must be the innocent one because he's not the one who left. So for him to have to say, don't attack Malaya, that's not something that he really wants to say. I'm thinking that has come from issues with him wanting to see his daughter, and we'll come back to that. And then he starts saying her mental health is... And he pauses and he doesn't finish that sentence. He hasn't spoken to her or had any connection with her for a month. So he really probably doesn't know in full what her mental health is like. Although for a mother who's lost her children, I'd imagine she's not doing so great. But either way, he can't finish saying that. His brain stops him. I think whatever he was going to say was going to be a little bit less than truthful. He's just going to let people fill in the gaps there. Now, it is quite possible that saying it that way was intentional, because I feel like this guy is very good at manipulating his audience. So he doesn't want to say anything outright that's going to come back and bite him on the arse when he's trying to get access to his children. But by saying her mental health is, you can guarantee that a bunch of people are going to run off with that and say, yeah, you know, she's got major mental health problems. It's just the inference there that's enough to convince the audience that that is something significant that they need to look at. And he follows through by saying, you know, it's going to be reflected on our daughter. So what he's saying here is that if his daughter wasn't involved, then it wouldn't really matter too much about Malaya's mental health. But because his daughter is involved, then that is of a concern for him. The way he's saying it makes me wonder if this is something that has come up in negotiations in terms of him wanting to see his daughter, because we know he's mentioned to the media in the past that he wasn't allowed to see his daughter. And now, later on, he talks about being allowed supervised visits. Now, my suspicion here is that this is not so much relating to people attacking Malaya online, although it probably, that's a secondary thing, but in terms of how it affects his daughter, I wouldn't be surprised if this is sort of the thing that's been put forward in terms of why he's not allowed to see his daughter, and that is because of issues between him and Malaya, and someone has probably said, look, you know, you being around Malaya right now is going to impact on the daughter because she's going to sense the tension, the stress, all that sort of things. But, I mean, let's be real too. All this is going to impact on the daughter regardless. And he finishes with saying, so I don't want anyone attacking Malaya anymore. I don't want anyone attacking Malaya anymore. Meaning, he was okay with it before. He just doesn't want it to happen anymore because it's going to impact on his daughter, or quite potentially impact on his ability to see his daughter. He's not saying it should never happen, it should have never happened. He just doesn't want it to happen anymore. None of this is out of concern for Malaya. This is out of concern for his own needs. And with this last statement, I don't want it happening anymore, he probably would like it to still happen if it wasn't going to impact on his ability to see his daughter. Because while people were focusing on Malaya, focusing on the fact that she left the area, focusing on the fact that he's the one doing all the interviews and he's supposedly the one searching, it was making him look good and making her look bad. It was making him the hero in the situation. So this is definitely not coming from him telling people to stop attacking Malaya, because it benefits him when people do. Hence the reason you get the anymore tacked on the end.
Jack and Lily's stepfather says he was the first to volunteer for a polygraph, hopeful it would help the search and ease public speculation.
I know it would be a big help in the case and kind of narrow down maybe some of the speculations and just provide more evidence.
Again, we're seeing priorities here. He's the first one to do a polygraph test. Because, of course, it's important to him to make sure that people know that he's innocent. And he's saying basically the reasoning for this. I know it would be a big help in the case. Well, right now the goal of the whole case is to find these children and to find out what's gone wrong, what's happened, where did they go. So if he's not connected to this in any way, if he's not involved, how can him doing a poly test actually be a big help to the case? It wouldn't be. So it could be a big help to him personally if he could beat the polygraph test, but this is not what it's about here. He's saying him doing a polygraph test would be a big help to the case. The only way it's going to be a big help to the case is if it brings out additional information that gets them closer to finding the children. Meaning that it's only going to be a big help to the case if he has knowledge of what happened to the children, or if he was involved with what happened to the children. So this is a major, major leakage here, especially because he doubles down and kind of narrow down maybe some of the speculations and just provide more evidence. Narrow down some of the speculations. In other words, provide answers to all the questions people are asking. Which again, is not going to happen if he's not involved in any way and if he's innocent. It's not going to narrow down some of the speculations if he knows nothing. The speculation will still continue. And actually, it's not going to narrow down any of the speculation, because obviously the results of these polygraph tests are not going to be published in the media or given out publicly. You're not going to hear the results of these polygraph tests on someone's YouTube channel. They're going to be kept under wraps, you bet. And just provide more evidence. My gosh, if that is not the biggest bit of leakage, one of the biggest bits of leakage we've had from this guy from the get-go, I don't know what is. Him doing a polygraph is going to provide more evidence for the case. Well, that's only going to be truthful, again, if he was involved. So he probably should just drop this whole thing of talking about polygraph tests, because he just makes himself look more guilty. Everything he's said here in relation to polygraph tests, I know he's tried to sound knowledgeable, and he's tried to give the impression that, well, I've done the polygraph test, I was the first one to jump in, and I know it helps because it shows that I am innocent. But the way he's worded it, major guilty leakage here. Everything he's said here about the polygraph test points towards him, at the very least, having guilty knowledge with regards to what happened to those children.
Daniel Martell says during the polygraph test, he was asked several things, including whether or not he was involved in the disappearance of the children. He says both his cell phone and that of his estranged wife were confiscated and searched by investigators.
Now, I'm going to presume here that they're really not actually talking about his ex-wife, the mother of his two eldest children, when they talk about his estranged wife. I believe they are talking about Malaya, who's actually not his wife. She is a former girlfriend, that is all. Okay, they were together 3 years and they had a child together. But they are no longer together. He is not a stepfather to those missing children. He is the former boyfriend of their mother. And it just bugs me that the media is pushing this narrative, this stepfather, this married narrative, trying to give him more ownership than he deserves. Now, it's interesting that they say he said that he was asked if he was involved in the disappearance of the children. Well, we don't hear that clip, so we don't know exactly what was said there, but you don't hear them saying, and he said that his answer was no, he was not involved. She's just relaying this is one of the questions that was asked. We don't even know what the answer was to that question. And now, him having said previously that he voluntarily handed over his phone, now we're hearing them say that his phone was confiscated, meaning that it wasn't him who initiated the handing over of the phone, it was requested and he handed it over.
This and weeks of interviews, there still hasn't been a major break in the case. And for their stepfather, the silence inside the once busy home is deafening.
Going from a family of 7 to just me, I mean, I have nothing but time to just think.
Now this is really interesting, him saying that they've gone from a family of 7 to just him. It is my understanding that his two older children do not live with him full time, and that they live with their mother. Now, obviously the focus has been kept off them, as it should be. But it's interesting that he's bringing them up here, because by saying going from a family of 7 to just him, suggests to me that he's also being denied access to his two eldest children. Why would that be? Just going to leave that out there hovering. It's a very interesting thought. And he's saying, I have nothing but time to just think. What happened to the searching? I thought you were going out searching every day for these children. If I was left behind living on that property and these children were supposed to have vanished off into the woods and I just had time to think, all that time for thinking, I would spend that walking out amongst the woods trying to find these children. He's making it pretty clear here that searching is not anything of a concern for him. He doesn't see the need to go out and search for these children.
I haven't even got to see my own kids, not even Meadow yet. But I'm still hopeful. I have supervised visits coming up that are granted by CPS.
Again, there's quite a bit to unpack here. And yes, I have stepped away from reading any of the body language. I think I've kind of made my point. We seem to see pretty much the same things from him throughout. That is that he is being very careful with his body language to the point where we are seeing less body language than we should, which is a red flag. When we do see things, they are quite often micro expressions, like the raising of the corners of the mouth, when he's making a statement that clearly seems to delight him. We also do see this slight shaking of the head on occasions, which to me seems to indicate deception. So let's go on to what he has said here. Starting with, I haven't even got to see my own kids. Not even Meadow yet. This is huge. This is a guy who's been in front of the media, putting himself out there as the stepfather. He's the one here who's doing all the interviews on behalf of the family. He's the one who cares enough to stick around. He's the one who did the Rambo thing, running through the woods, running through waist-deep water, searching for these kids. He's said that he will never give up. This will be his life's mission or something along those lines. But what he's said here shows us exactly where he stands. He hasn't even gotten to see his own kids, especially Meadow, or not even Meadow. This to me tells me a lot and confirms a lot of what I've been saying. He doesn't feel a connection to these two children. He doesn't see them as his own kids. They're Malaya's kids. He doesn't have that emotional connection to them where he feels like he's become a stepfather to them. His own kids are Meadow and the two older kids. Now, the other thing here is that he emphasises Meadow. The emphasis here is that Meadow is his own kid, not these two children who are missing. That, to me, is both hugely significant and a red flag, and I'm going to tell you why. Some of these names may sound familiar to you. Cadence Mills, 3 years old. Shalise Mutton, 9 years old. Nadia Kalinowska, 5 years old. Emmeline Mitchell, 2 years old. Tia Sharp, 12 years old. And this is just the start of a very, very long list. Now, Tia Sharp is slightly different from these other children because it was actually her step-grandfather who was responsible for her death. However, her grandmother was her custodian. So it's not too dissimilar from these other cases where all these children are no longer alive because of their stepfathers. So to hear Daniel make that differentiation and not only refer to his own kids, but particularly refer to Meadow, the daughter who is the half-sibling of Jack and Lily. He's pointing out here that Meadow is his child, not these two children. To me, that is definitely a red flag. That is something that I do find particularly concerning. He claims to be their champion. We're told he's a stepfather, but basically he's made it pretty clear here. He's drawn his line in the sand. He doesn't view them as his children. And the wording of it too. I haven't even gotten to see my own kids. This is something that he's particularly displeased about. I haven't even gotten to do this. That's what's important to him, being able to see his own kids. And this situation has put him in a position where he doesn't even get to see his own kids. You could perhaps go as far as saying that he is resentful of this situation. He's resentful that because of these kids being missing, he's not able to see his own kids, regardless of who was involved with the disappearance of these children. His primary concern here is not Jack and Lily. Jack and Lily, who've been missing for over a month now. His primary concern is that because of this, he can't see his own children. But this statement at the end has got me extremely curious. He says he's still hopeful and that he's got supervised visits coming up granted by the CPS. Now, I'm going to guess that these supervised visits are with Meadow because that's the focus of what he's talking about here. So, why is it that he needs to go through CPS to actually have supervised visits with Meadow? And why only supervised visits? Why is he not being granted? Why is he not allowed to have time with Meadow on his own? Now, here's the thing. CPS in Canada is going to be like CPS everywhere else in the world. They have so many cases on their plate that they are dealing with that they don't have time to deal with just a simple custodial issue. If we're talking about a situation where things haven't gone to court yet and arrangements haven't been made, CPS aren't going to be doing that. Can you imagine every family in Canada that splits up and the non-custodial parent going to CPS and going, I want to see my children? They'd be so busy organising that they wouldn't be able to follow up on reports of CA, child abs. I don't even know what words I can and can't use on YouTube anymore. So why is it that he needs permission from CPS to see his daughter? And why is it that it has to be supervised? This is huge for me. This says that there are some allegations against Daniel. Allegations which mean that there are concerns about allowing him unsupervised access to his baby daughter. Now, we can guess these allegations probably have come from Malaya. Are they any way connected to this investigation? We don't know. Now, we do know that when relationships break up, things get pretty nasty. I recall being caught in a situation where two very close friends of mine broke up. And the mother of their children, well, the two friends were a married couple, mother, father, handful of kids, and the mother was not allowing the father access to the children, basically out of spite. And he asked me to lie on his behalf and say that she was, I can't remember whether it was neglectful or abusive or something negative about her and her relationship with the children, to help his case. And I basically said, well, sod off, I'm not lying for either of you. And I actually ended up walking away from the friendship because I was caught in the middle. But the point there is, yes, it does get nasty. And yes, people make allegations. But at the end of the day, there is some sort of allegation here. And at the end of the day, Malaya cleared out within 2 days of these kids going missing with her little girl, and doesn't want to let her little girl see her father. There's definitely something significant here. And of course, by the sounds of it, it sounds like he's also being denied access to his two older children. So what is the situation here? Why is he not being allowed access to his children? Because that's got me really, really curious. You can't say that it's just because Jack and Lily are missing, because otherwise they would have taken Meadow off Malaya also. But we know for a fact, I know there's rumours, but we know for a fact that Meadow is with Malaya. So him not being given access to Meadow has got nothing to do with the children being missing per se. It has to do with something connected directly to him. Likewise with his older children. I mean, how many cases do you see? Yes, the Summer Wells case stands out with all three of the boys being taken away from Don and Candace, but it was pretty clear that they were not in a position to give those boys the care that they required, and that those boys, for their own safety, needed to be in foster homes and away from their parents, away from that house, which just wasn't suitable for children. But other children's cases, it is not standard practice when a child goes missing to remove the rest of the children from the family, or to deny one parent or another access to those children. So there is definitely something more going on behind the scenes here. There is some reason that Daniel is only allowed supervised access to his daughter. And I think that tells us a lot. I think that tells us possibly the direction of where this whole investigation is headed. I just want to come back to this photo of Jack before we finish here and point something out. So you can see on his chin that there is an old wound that is healing up. It is just that. There's no bruising, there's no other wounds around his face, and it is in a perfectly circular shape. the moment I looked at that, I said to myself, that looks like a cigarette burn. And I know I've said this in some of my early videos on this case. I have, through my career, I'm not going into, like I said, I keep myself private, but I have on a professional level encountered children with cigarette burns on their arms. I've never encountered children with cigarette burns on their faces before, but I've encountered children with cigarette burns on their arms when CPS have then had to become involved. And they are distinctive burns. Once you've seen them, you know what you're looking for. And you know when you see it and you ask the kid, is that a cigarette burn? And you know the answer is going to be yes. The challenge, of course, then comes with a lot of the time the children will try and pass it off as they did it themselves, or they were just playing around and somehow happened to get burnt by a cigarette. I've heard all the stories. I also showed this photo to someone I know who also has dealt with these things on a professional level, and asked them what they saw. Didn't direct them directly to anything specific. I said, is there anything about this photo that stands out to you? And straight away they pointed out that it appears like a cigarette burn on his face. So my question is this: if this is a cigarette burn on Jack's face, how did it get there? What happened that meant that it got there in the first place? And have there been other instances of similar kind of things with this child prior to when he went missing? Now, this could all be perfectly innocent. None of it's connected. It could be something other than a cigarette burn. It just looks like one. But there's a lot of things here that are red flags for me. Things that leave me with more questions. So I'm going to leave it here. I just want to remind people that these are, of course, my opinions based on my own interpretation of body language and of verbal language, and based on my own professional background and professional experience. None of this means that I am correct. I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about something that is subjective here. I remember the Cleo Smith case, which was a case here in Australia, of a little girl in Western Australia who vanished from a campsite. And I watched the interview with her parents, and I was convinced that they had nothing to do with it. But then I questioned myself, because I then watched an episode of the behaviour panel, and they were full on going at the parents. I can't remember whether they're going at the stepfather or both parents, but they were full on going at them and saying they know they were involved. And the thing is, 18 days after Cleo went missing, she was found. She had been abducted by a man who lived in the same town as them, and he had unzipped the tent where Cleo was and taken her, and he had had her in his house that entire time. Ironically, I also saw an episode somewhat recently of the interview panel going, this is what innocent looks like, and they used a clip of Cleo's parents as, look, see, we said this back then. And I'm thinking, No, you didn't, because I distinctly remember it, and I was really PO'd with you for making these accusations, because suddenly all these other American channels were jumping on board and saying, look at these parents, they've done something to their child. So my point here is that nobody gets it right 100% of the time. This is simply my opinion. And for all we know, I could be wrong. So that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you for watching. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit the like button. YouTube loves that. And also, please leave a comment below. Thank you, and I will catch you in the next one.